Hello, beautiful. Welcome to In Love. My name is Natalie Garnica, and today we're going to be focusing on owning our feminine energy and what I think we can see as our superpower. In order to help me with this conversation, I brought on the awesome Alexandra Roxo.
Roxo, you did a great job. It's a Brazilian last name, and it actually means purple. It's the color purple in Portuguese. Um, and my dad is from Brazil, so that's where I get a lot of my spice. Actually, I can think the Roxos in my family. They're all kind of fiery and intense and passionate.
I love it. I love it. So, as you can already see, Alexandra is a very passionate, feminine, fiery woman, and she is on a mission to really help other women connect with that energy to transform women to heal themselves through just channeling who they really are. So she does a lot of healing work, live workshops. She's also a writer and is one of the founders of an online community called Moon Club, which I'm sure she will share more about in a bit. So she's been featured on a bunch of like TV shows, podcasts, magazines like Teen Vogue and Mind Body Green. If you guys have not checked out Mind Body Green, I know Alexandra has a couple of her personal writings in there. So again, Alexandra, thanks for jumping on here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everyone who's watching and tuning in. We're really happy that you're here with us on this journey.
Yeah, so maybe we can start off with a little bit of your personal journey, and really like what called you to start helping women channel their energy.
So, like I said before, I grew up with a Brazilian father, and then my mother's from the South. And so I spent a lot of my childhood in Brazil and also in Georgia and like the Bible Belts. And from a young age, I started to feel how my sexuality, my self-expression in certain places was not okay. So, for instance, in Georgia, to be an expressed woman, right? To walk down the street like feeling overflowing and your femininity or your sensuality, enjoying, appreciating life in a certain way was actually not okay. But then I would go to Brazil and femininity was just like complete opposite. It was like string bikinis and lipstick and getting hair done and like kissing boys, and my aunts in Brazil would peek down my shirt and be like, how are your boobs coming? And they would be like, who did you make out with last night? And your parents in Brazil would drop you at the club at like at 11 p.m. and you were 12 or 13, because there's just a whole different culture of play and dancing and food and beauty, and it has its shadows and it has its light, just like growing up in the South did. But from a young age, I really started to feel like confused and curious as to where my femininity really fit in the world, and especially in spirituality and religion. I had a really deep mystical calling in my soul from a young age, and I had some really mystical experiences from a young age, and I felt really sad because I felt like, wait, where is the feminine in any of the religious experiences that I'm seeing, unless she's a virgin or a whore? And that was in the Catholic, right? But in the Protestants, the women weren't even exist. They didn't even exist. Like, the Protestant sort of church and like, the figures, the leaders, the people in the Bible, Mother Mary wasn't even really looked at as a saint. So I at a young age was feeling very curious and troubled about how my sexuality fit into the world and how my spirituality fit into the world. and I didn't really find it present. Not only that, but upon further inquiry, I began to see that women were highly oppressed in many, many cultures. And I was really pained as a young girl. I thought, oh my God, women in certain countries are getting stoned to death for looking at a man. I really sat and I looked at statistics, and I really started to feel into like, wait, something is really out of balance on this planet between men and women. Why are so many children sexually abused? Why are so many women raped? Obviously, there is something that's been pushed down so deep inside us as humans that the shadow parts of it have come up and been expressing for hundreds of years, the shadows, right? And so I started to see maybe there was a correlation between that and women being discluded from religion, from politics, from decision making on a global scale. And for me, my inquiry first expressed itself through art. So my first play that I wrote was called This Little Light of Mine, and it was about my own light being suppressed. And the play was a Christian woman and a Muslim woman, and it was talking about they were stuck in a home for bad girls, and they both essentially had been told by their cultures that they were bad for being expressed, being sensual, being vibrant beings. And that play was my first expression as an artist of, this is not right. This doesn't feel right that women are being treated this way. And so that inquiry continued in my art. I was primarily an artist. I made photos, I showed them in galleries, I made experimental films that were somewhat ritualistic prayers about my relationship with different goddesses. And I continued to express myself through art. I made a feature film called Mary Marie that was about my relationship with Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. That was when I was 23. And then I made a web series, 2 seasons, called Be Here Nowish. That was really, it's a comedy about my spiritual path, and about 2 girls who leave New York and come to LA and like do all this very LA woo-woo stuff. And I made documentaries with Vice. And so my path really started as an artist, inquiring essentially like, why are things like this? What happened? When did they become like this? Where as women, we hate our bodies, we think we need to be skinny, we are comparing ourselves to each other, we're isolated, we don't see ourselves reflected in divinity, therefore we don't feel divine, like all this stuff. I was just like, oh my goodness. And so a few years ago, I heard the call as I was in a plant medicine ceremony that it was time to translate my work from being a filmmaker and an artist into helping and working with women one-on-one and in groups. Mm-hmm. At the time, I thought it was so cool. And I thought, oh my God, like, people are not going to take me seriously. Like, what are all my cool friends going to think? Like, I was going to the celebrity parties and, you know, I felt really like splashy and important at that time. And I thought, what are people going to think if I'm coming out as a coach or a healer or whatever? And I remember actually a boyfriend I had at the time who was a film director and a TV director. He said, don't tell people this, because they won't take you seriously as an artist if you ever want to be a director again or a filmmaker, if you say you're like a coach or something. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm about to go through a really big transition. And some of the people from my old life will probably slip away as I reprioritize things for myself. And so I did. I reprioritized things, and literally everything slipped away from the past. It crumbled, all the old friendships, the old communities that I was a part of. And I allowed for a great big clearing, like the Tower card in the tarot, and allowed for a new journey to come forth. And so that journey has now been the last, I believe 4 years. The last 2 years very intensely, but the last 4 years has been kind of like when things began, of transitioning and creating a career and a job for myself where I spend all my days in service and expressing. And I write about my journey. Writing is like my favorite thing in the world. And I work with clients one-on-one, which I also adore, and I teach retreats. And so I made that crazy leap from having a kind of a more ego-driven career that was super fun and that had arisen from art, right? But then taking that into like pure a relationship of service. So
I love that you're sharing that, because I think I'm definitely resonating with this part of my life. That,
yeah,
as working in fashion and styling, being around a lot of like same music artists. And yeah, that's a very ego place. Like it definitely nurtures that my ego a little bit when I'm like at these events. And then at the same time, knowing that a deeper part of me is like calling, right? That there's a calling for me to be like, okay, and what more can I be of service to people?
yeah,
And so I love that you're sharing that. And also for anyone that's listening, if you're, afraid to take that transition in those moments of like, okay, I feel something's calling me. I don't know what it is yet, but I do know that a part of me needs to, in a sense, die, right? Like a part of you needs to just completely transform and change. It's important to just listen
yeah,
to the voice inside, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And so going back to like also what you were saying, like when you were looking at all your questions and being like, okay, well, how did this even start, right? Like how did like the masculine voice just kind of overpower everything, right? Like, and
Yeah.
in no sense, I don't know why this visualization came to me of like just even women, we call Earth Mother Earth, right? And I feel like women are very connected to just being grounded. And at the same time, I feel like this rise of women, of our voices, is happening right now along with nature. Like I feel like nature's also kind of like having its moment and being like, yo, something's got to change, right? And so I feel like there's something happening within women and us that's kind of like, yeah, something's got to change. So maybe you can give a little bit of your, like, what are your feelings on this? Like, what have you kind of been coming around in this movement of women kind of coming back and
Yeah.
owning their power?
That's a great question. And I love how you just put it with all the nature part and everything. It is true. It's like the thing about nature, and I can't remember who said this to me recently, but it's like, Earth will be fine. Earth will be fine. The animals and the humans, we might not, but she'll be fine. She'll regenerate. She'll just like, go through a detox and do her thing, that actually makes me happy. I'm like, great. You need to eradicate us. You go, girl. I trust you. Um, but I think that right now what's happening is the sort of rising up that's happening is essential to a reintegration, right? It's kind of like the pendulum has to swing in order for it to find a middle ground. It can't just go from like, okay, uber patriarchal, all men making all decisions in religion, in science, in politics, to then like, okay, no, we're just going to find balance. It's kind of like it has to swing over this way a little bit until it finds its center. So I have a feeling that we're part of the energy, the movement that's going to make the swing kind of, but I think it's going to swing past center for a while. And that's not an original idea. I think other people have probably said that. I think that the pendulum was way over here in like this patriarchal landscape, and that essentially a bunch of women right now are rising to give this momentum for it to swing back. But I think that it's going to swing past center into a bit more of a female centric land. That might be after we die, I'm not sure. until it hits that balance point. Because it's very rare that something goes from so far out of balance to just beep, balance, right? It's kind of like, right? So I'm curious as to, like, somebody asked me a question recently. They're like, well, don't you think it should be not focused on women rising, but just like us coming together? And I'm like, I do. And I think there has to be some retribution time, not only for women, but for indigenous peoples, for people of color, and all, like, I think there's going to be some time where, no, we need to give the people who have been oppressed the platforms to speak and to stand before it just comes, oh no, we're just going to have a balance. You know, it's just like, oh no, it's fine, we're just going to balance out. No, I think for a while the white men are going to have to be stepped aside, and they're going to be like sort of, and I don't think that's necessarily going to be continue to be fun. I think there's a lot of anger and, you know, transformational fire that's going to come through there, be it from people of color, indigenous people, or women, and or all. And the different stories and layers of oppression are so different for everybody, right? And depending your cultural background, all of it, it's just so different. So I think that as much as like we want to just be like, cool, like women are risen, like now we're all equal, I'm like, no, it's not. It's not like that yet. You saw our president, what he said about the women in Congress. It's like, no, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, and it's definitely like an uncomfortable space right now for everyone, you know, for the people that are losing some, in some ways, they feel they're losing their power. They're getting really uncomfortable and they're like, yo, like we don't are like, well, now is this fair for us too now or not? Like, you know, so now everybody feels somewhat neglected or oppressed or just like things are just not fair, right? And at the same time, I think about, well, how are we creating that ourselves, right? Like, well, I can only really control what's happening around my environment. And so therefore, like, I try and focus on the relationships that I'm creating in my life, right? And so for those people that are kind of in this, like, I don't know where I'm landing right now, or especially for the women, like, how do you kind of allow or share with them, like, to own their power, own their feminine energy, and also do it in a, I guess, in a loving way, right?
Yeah. Well, I think this is where we kind of switch from right now. We were talking about kind of like that big overarching picture, right? Like we painted a picture for everybody. Okay, this is like the broad strokes, the sky view looking down. But so then coming in right now to the heart, the internal landscape, right? Our inner journey that we're all experiencing, which is a microcosm of that big thing we just talked about. So all that pain, oppression, suffering, all things have been happening for so long, we then are experiencing internally in our own lives. Could be rejection or abandonment, it could be abuse, it could be self-hatred, it could be lack of self-worth. Like there are all these things that are essentially symptoms of the big system being out of whack. And so before we just kind of like sit around hemming and hawing about fixing the outside world, we have to look, okay, how is that external world playing out inside of me? And that's a big one. And a lot of my work is around giving women the courage to heal and to say, like, to be real about what's hurting. And that takes a lot of courage. You know, it's a lot easier to pretend you're not in pain, to pretend that you're not dealing with self-hatred or lack of self-worth or rejection from a loved one, or whatever narratives or stories that you've been given this life. If we don't sit and look at them and examine them and let them be our teachers, then we're not really showing up to our own curriculum. And if we don't do that, then we can't really show up to the external curriculum, because it's like the blind leading the blind in a sense. You know, it's like we have to be honest and say, okay, well, wow, like So in my own life, where have I been blind, or where have I been unconscious or unconsciously repeated patterns that were passed down to me? And could I stop and pause and say, wow, what if the train stops here? Like, I think that's a Marianne Williamson thing. I think she says that, but like, what if instead of me just perpetuating the patterns I inherited from my family, what if I stop and do the work on myself? And that requires a lot of courage, because doing the work on yourself means feeling all the pain, sorrow, anger, grief, all of it, which can be completely overwhelming if you don't have a practice or a community. You really want to make sure that you enter the healing journey with responsibility for yourself. And once you do start feeling that stuff, you also have to engage in a lot of self-processing. Okay, wow, where did I fuck up? You know, where was I like unaware of my patterns? Wow, where was I actually hurt and that person hurt me, but I didn't want to admit it? Where was I in an abusive relationship or an unconscious relationship with someone in my life? Like, it just, the internal inquiry and processing begins. And that sort of unraveling can take many, many years for there to bring awareness to all the places inside of you where you've completely been numb or the lights have been out in your internal home. And so that requires practice, that requires community, meditation, journaling, whatever modalities work for you. That is the first step in claiming your power again, right? Because you have to know that your power has been either taken or has been unconsciously kind of pushed away. You have to first have that awareness, which is, oh shit, I've been pushing away my power by spending most of my days dieting and worrying about being skinny for 10 years. Oh my God, what a leak of my power. What if I had actually loved my body for those 10 years and not spent all that brain power on worrying about my body? Then think of how powerful I might be in the world, right? And that takes a lot of mourning and grieving, a lot of sadness, a lot of self-forgiveness, right? That's just one example. And then
that's super important that you're sharing that. It's like, of course, it's people would avoid feeling those feelings again. Like the initial, like, I guess, trauma, the initial pain is caused, and then we try and prevent ourselves, like out of fear, you know, we try and prevent ourselves from feeling that again. But in order to really like go through it, like release it, you have to like
go through it. That's what you said. Perfect.
100%. And I also like that you shared that it's like, and you can't do it alone. You know, like doing it alone is so much harder.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about like you and the community that you've created, like around Moon Club, that it is a community of women that can support one another as you journey through like the different transitions that you're happening in your life.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know, maybe you can share a little bit more about Moon Club and like what it is that you ladies do there.
Yeah. So Moon Club, so in my own pursuits of looking for spiritual tradition and things that were non-patriarchal and non-dogmatic, I found the cycles of the moon. And the cycles of the moon are very feminine. They've been honored in traditions and cultures around the world. So it's not even specific to one tradition, right? The moon is there for the whole earth. So you find so much lunar mythology in the Greeks, the Romans, the Mayans, you know, African traditions, Australian, Aboriginal, like everybody has a connection to the moon. And in many of those traditions, not all of them, but many of the traditions, the moon is related to the feminine, and it's related to this sense of mystery and this sense of the deep subconscious. And why is that related to the woman? Well, because woman births life, right? So woman essentially is a portal to the great mystery that we can't understand, right? So in a female body, if you have the capacity to give life or not, but there is this essentially a portal to divinity, to God, to something that we can't understand. We don't know how it happens. We don't know why it happens. And there's a great mystery there, a mystical mystery. So the moon is related to that essentially in this very similar way. We don't know why it's there. We know that it calls the tides in and out. It impacts the waters of the earth. We know that there's more car accidents and wild things happening around the moon's fullness. And you can really you can look at statistics, and it's like, wow, people go crazy statistically for thousands of years when the moon is full. What's up with that? Well, guess what? We don't know. We know there's an electromagnetic field there. We know that there's some, but the science doesn't know. It's a great mystery. So for me, I began to tap into the lunar cycles when I was quite young, like 19 or so. And I began to notice and pay attention to my own rhythms of healing, of insights, of self-realization, of creativity. And I began to just practice around the moon, like setting intentions, doing rituals, celebrating the full moon with friends, with food, with wine. And those rituals continued for over a decade. I made a promise to my own self and to the infinite whatever it is, that I would practice for 10 years before I led others. And I got this moon tattoo, and I said, I'm not going to get a moon tattoo until I've worked with the moon for 10 years, because I don't want to do some, like sort of dabbling. Oh, I love that symbol, but I don't know it. And it's actually quite potent, right? Any symbols are very potent. So I've been working with the moon for so long, and then I had this idea to lead an online moon circle, and no one had done that at that point. What's really cool is now that it's very common. When I don't like to necessarily like egoically claim that I was the first one, but when I led these online virtual full moon circles, it was pretty weird. No one was doing that. It was just like, okay, like, all right, now I see it all the time. And I sort of laughed to Ruby, and I'm like, dude, it's so weird that like when I did that the first time, and I led them online for free for a year, because I wanted to test it out and see, could you have a mystical, deep experience with yourself via the internet? And people I was leading them in a guided journey of meditation into their heart space, which I do all the time. And people were saying, oh my God, I had the most incredible healing. I had the most incredible download, da, da, da. So after a year of leading online full moon gatherings for free for hundreds of people, we created Moon Club and said, okay, come in. It's a membership. You get this live gathering every month, and then we're going to give you a workbook with little rituals to do every week and journal prompts. And then you get the Facebook community so you can share about your journey. And it's just been epic. So, and we have now live circles around the world that our members are empowered to lead their own circles. So we have really incredible communities in Boston and San Francisco and New York, in a bunch of different places, Chicago, Detroit, San Diego. Like, we have a lot of cities and women stepping up and leading circles. And that's the ultimate goal, is that we can create safe spaces for people to come together without religion, without some sort of a teacher that knows it all, but just a space to share. We do a lot of storytelling, breath work, and just intention setting and holding space for each other.
I love that. Again, this is super powerful, like online stuff, but then when you're able to then bring it to life, like, again, create a deeper connection, like, it's so good. And so I know something that we were sharing before, like we did this interview, was how important, just when women come together, how that is, and how powerful that is too. How yes, you did the work yourself first, and that's super important. But then the next step is, now how can I share this with others? How can I help and support other ladies as well, because I know, and I shared this with you as well, that it's like I didn't really own my full power of my feminine energy until I started working for a woman who focuses on only supporting women. And, you know, growing up in the United States in a very masculine energy, you know, that's the type of personality I was embodying. You know, I was embodying my masculine energy more than my feminine. And up until like 2 years ago was I like an awakening happened. You know, an awakening happened when I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to surround yourself with women. This
Yeah.
was so good, you know. So I love that you create that for other women as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, so maybe you can lead us on a meditation to help women now to just tap into their feminine energy a little bit for today.
Yes. Okay, great. So let's close our eyes. One of the things that I do is lead people into embodied practice. So the word embodiment is essentially being in your body, getting into your body. An embodied experience on your spiritual path is experiencing something inside you, through you, and so as opposed to outside you, right? So that's kind of my definition. You can define it however you'd like. A lot of the spiritual teachings that we might find or that we might relate to are dualistic. They relate to an experience outside of us. It's not quite that we find something within, right? So I'm not going to get into the whole kind of all of the deep dives about that. That's kind of the top layer. But in Moon Club, we do a lot of work getting in our bodies, getting out of our heads and telling our mind, we're good, let's be quiet, let's feel the heart, let's hear the wisdom in that divine portal in the womb, in the belly. And it takes a lot of practice because we live in a mind-oriented culture, not a heart-oriented culture, not a body-oriented culture. Like, you know, we're really a culture that it talks and we're like heady and we're intellectual, right? So to drop that sort of stuff and just come into the present in the body is very different. And you can study different cultures that are not intellectual cultures or mind-based cultures, and you might look at them and be like, we don't. And that's because they're living a different way than we are. So there's something to be that's aspirational about that, you know, about coming back to the heart, and knowing that there's a lot of wisdom within us and it's not just here. So that's my little precursor. Okay, close your eyes. Okay, so a quick exercise. The first thing I want you all to do is to soften your belly. And I want you to put your right hand on your lower belly. And I want you to feel how perhaps due to your conditioning or just your habit, that belly might be kind of tightened or pulled in. And I want you to take a few deep belly breaths and just feel your hand moving under your belly. So breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. And feel your belly rising and falling. And if you want, you can lay down on your bed and put a book on your belly and watch it rise and fall. But for now, just feel is your hand moving on top of your belly. Just noticing that as your first step. The second thing I want you to do is to soften your jaw and part your lips. So the jaw is directly connected to the pelvis and all of the pelvic floor muscles, the anal muscles, the genital muscles. So when you're clenched down below, right, from just over like just living life tight. And then you usually clench your face too and your jaw. Your gorgeous feminine essence and power does not flow under such tightness. So from here, taking another 3 deep breaths, I want you to exhale with a sigh, with an HA. I want you to feel your face, your jaw soft. And I want you to also feel your whole pelvic area is starting to soften, your lower belly softening, so that when you're breathing, you feel like you almost have a pregnant belly of air. It should feel that deliciously soft under your hand. It might feel really like pudgy and fat. That might feel, you might think, oh my God, I can't push my belly out like that. But really, your belly is like a balloon there that can relax and soften. So breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. And again. And out. And again. And out. I'm beginning to notice your awareness dropping down with each breath. I want you to stay with that big belly breath. You can imagine that you're pulling your awareness into the lower part of your body, and that each breath is stoking a fire in your belly. So that if you had a little pilot light in there, that each breath and the big softening and ballooning in and out is creating a warmth in your belly. And so really making the inhale and the exhale really distinguished. Not being afraid of the sound coming forth from you, making a little bit of sound. You can use an HA, which is a seed syllable. It's a vibration. It will draw you in. It creates a vibration inside of you that really does pull you into your body. So if you're tense and tight, or you've been in your head all day, you might have to add a little extra breath and really breathe in the big inhale and exhale so that it's audible. Right now my nose is stuffy, but I'm going to try the best I can. So just really committing for a few minutes, breathing in. Eventually, if you stay with that breath, it will start to warm up your central channel. It will start to warm your heart. And really making a sound, letting there be sound, letting yourself sound silly if you think it sounds silly to make a sigh and to go, ha. Letting yourself get free a little bit, softening your shoulders. Beginning to find a rhythm to your breathing with sound, right? So eventually, this can sound almost orgasmic or like you're birthing in a sense. You can really So there are 3 components. The first is the breath, and really relaxing into that breath usually takes a little while because it doesn't feel natural. The second is adding the sound and that vibration, and letting the sound be a vehicle for your self-expression. And the third piece is adding a little bit of pelvic movement or movement in your spine. So eventually, as you're practicing and you're breathing, you can be moving in your spine a little bit, snaking through your spine, your ribs. These are really some fundamentals to embodiment that I started practicing in acting school. These are ways that I found to come into my emotional being, to come into my physical being, in my body and out of my head, taught to me way back. So things I've been practicing again and again and again. As you can see, it's hard. And if I were doing this with you one-on-one, I would keep pushing you to let go of the mind. And eventually, and I have a free guided practice on Insight Timer with this. Eventually, you will come out of your mind and start to release and move. And emotions may move, they don't have to move, but insights will be found. Often emotions need to move because none of us are processing emotions in real time. Otherwise, we would be in a culture where we're banging drums and we're dancing and we're screaming and we're mourning. We don't do that, most of us in Western white culture. So unless that's part of your daily practice where you're moving energy, drumming, playing, singing, dancing, then likely you're probably not processing emotions in real time. And in order to be embodying your feminine energy, you have to learn how to let emotions flow through you as a part of your practice with yourself. So you're not scared of them, they're your juice. And you don't cling to them and you don't identify with them. You let them move through you like weather. So until you get into that practice, you'll live life kind of scared of them and avoiding them, and you won't be current. So you might be faced with a situation of great gratitude, but your capacity to feel gratitude is only like a 5%. You won't feel gratitude where tears drip down your face and you say, thank you. So that means we're not really feeling life, right? If we're just kind of buzzing from thing to thing without letting it imprint on us. So we do this practice so that we can get current with what's moving through us and learn how to feel life again. And through that, our power comes forth. Our power to love, our power to create, our power to have sex from a place of consciousness or to use our sexual energy as creation, and our power to speak our truths. It comes from deep, deep in here. So it's a deep practice. I have a practice on Insight Timer that's a longer practice. And then I have a course called How to Embody Your Feminine Fire on my website that you can do that has 3 videos and 2 practices. So if you really want to work on this and to free your voice, to free your creative energy and to come into your femininity a bit more.
I love this. I love this. I always say, or I like to say, women can view their vagina either as a crutch or a tool. And in this case, I would love for women to see that it can be your superpower. You know, once you connect to that and you really get grounded in the power that comes with having a vagina, it's so life changing. It's so life changing. So, you know, for women that are connecting with us right now in this breath and want to take it deeper with Alexandra, I highly encourage you check out this program that she has, the
How to Embody Your Feminine Fire.
the How to Embody Your Feminine Fire.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun. And you get that in Moon Club too. So if you want to try Moon Club for a month, let us know. I can also do, I'll send you a link where you can get a free month of Moon Club if you buy the course, which we do sometimes too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, honestly, Alexandra, this was beautiful. It was beautiful connecting with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, just having this moment to talk about what's happening with women right now, you know, how we can really connect with our power and doing it in a loving way where we will connect with others also, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I just urge people to have the courage to look deep because you know you only have this one life or this one life as this person you are, and we either go into it, we dive into the tough stuff, we move through it, we make art out of it, we embrace it, or we avoid it, right? And you have the capacity to actually move through it. I've moved through so much tough stuff and essentially found my power on the other side. So I wish you all courage. I'm here. I'm here as a leader, as a guide, as a guidepost. Follow me on Instagram and love to support you in your journey.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so until next time, I hope you all have a lovely day.